Great. So Liam and I have the first item on the agenda today. We were just putting together an issue about the day-to-day changes that are going to happen in scalability. Mostly what we were trying to demonstrate is that this is very much still a work in progress. We're still figuring out what these changes mean, but we're starting to put together some ideas for the teams in terms of roadmaps and the next steps. Mostly we're hoping that people will continue to concentrate on closing out the current projects, which we've listed there. There are 5 in progress at the moment. And as we start to wrap those up, we can start the new projects up in line with the new teams that have been created. So we just wanted to put this issue out there, show people what we're thinking about, and as things change, it'll be listed on this issue. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Liam.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. Igor, obviously, you've probably seen our one-on-one agenda. I spoke with Huang Ming yesterday, and he kind of gave me some feedback, I think, that you had on your sort of shared call with him around the transition and kind of like what the next steps are. And I think the transition has been very fairly informal so far, and I think that's kind of been purposely so, because we don't kind of foresee there being like big changes or like the need for a hard split between the two teams. But I appreciate that also means that maybe people are feeling maybe a bit lost in terms of what's next or exactly what the teams are going to be responsible for. So hopefully we can answer some of those questions and set a bit more clarity in this issue. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, that's probably a good place to put them.
Cool. Well, if there are no questions, we'll pass. Well, Igor, you've got a fun debugging story I'm keen to hear about.
Yeah, I don't have any immediate questions on this. Just wanted to say thanks for putting this together. I think this is going to be helpful to give us all a better idea of what's going to happen next. Thanks. Yeah, and with that, I guess I've got the next item. So fun debugging story, not directly related to scalability work, and I was only very peripherally involved with this, but it was fun enough that I figured I'd kind of share it. So Steve Azzopardi was working on this, and he really did the bulk of the work on it. We were seeing 502 errors during deployments. And yeah, Steve was kind of digging into why that is, and spent a couple of days on it, and then at some point discovered that our graceful shutdown of those pods is not actually working as intended. So the way that it is supposed to work is we kind of send a term signal to terminate the process. It'll finish its currently ongoing work and then shut itself down gracefully once it's finished those requests. If it doesn't finish those requests in time, or if it doesn't shut down on its own in time, then it'll get a hard kill after a certain grace period. The message for receiving that graceful shutdown signal wasn't being logged. So basically, it wasn't receiving that signal as far as we could tell. And so let me just pull up the issue here. So the way that we run this in Kubernetes is we have a Docker file. Let me find the Docker file as well. Yes, here. So we've got this Docker file that defines how we run the container in the pod. And so this is calling to a wrapper script for the workhorse container or the workhorse process. And then inside of this wrapper script, we're calling GitLab workhorse. And the issue is, and we can actually see this if we look at the process hierarchy, we have bash, which is a wrapper script, and then workhorse as a sub-process of that wrapper script. And whenever you see this type of thing, that usually indicates that bash is going to swallow up all of the signals that it receives and is not going to forward those signals to this process. That is a thing that shells do. And so what's happening is, yeah, exactly this. Bash is receiving the signals and workhorse is not getting them. And so the way that we can fix that is by adding a single keyword before this, which is exec. And what that will do is, instead of workhorse being a sub process or a child process of bash, it will actually make bash become the workhorse process. And so we won't have that bash in between, and we will start receiving signals directly. So that seemed like a pretty nice and simple fix. And so we deployed that fix. However, the process was still not receiving signals. And so something was still kind of weird. And so looking at the diff between before and after, we see before we have bin sh, well, at the top level, bin sh, bin bash, and then workhorse. And then the new thing is bin sh at the top level, and then workhorse directly. So we lost bin bash, but we still have this bin sh thing, which is PID1. So that's kind of the init process of this container. And one kind of unintuitive aspect of PID1 is on a Unix system, PID1 is kind of the root process, and everything else is actually directly or indirectly a sub process of PID1. And so what that means is this GitLab workhorse is in fact nested under this bin sh, and top just displays it as a top level item because it looks at the parent PID and says, well, parent is 1. So for all intents and purposes, we'll consider this a top level process, but it's actually nested under this bin sh. And the same way that this bin bash is consuming the signals, this bin sh is doing exactly the same thing. It's eating up our signals. So we have the same problem twice, actually. And so the final question is, where is this bin sh coming from? And so if we look at the CMD, I'm not seeing a bin sh in here. So this to me looks like it's supposed to be executing the wrapper script directly. But there's clearly some bin sh somewhere. So is this Docker? Is this Kubernetes? Like, is someone just adding that without our knowledge? And so I got kind of lucky and stumbled over the Docker CMD documentation. And here they say the following. You have two ways of defining a CMD. Two ways of defining a CMD command. You can either define it as kind of a string, and this is what they call the shell form, or you can define it as array form, where you kind of use this JSON-like syntax. If you use the shell form, it will automatically wrap your command in bin sh. So basically, if you don't use the square bracket, you don't get any signals. And
so that was an interesting find, knowing that, like just knowing where to look, like having the thought to go and look at the Docker documentation for how command was running.
yes, and this is affecting not only Workhorse, but actually other pods as well. So we can now go back and audit all of our Docker files and fix all of these and impose a policy to always use this syntax.
So is that something that Steve's going to drive to go and have that review done?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Nice find. Must have been quite satisfying to see that.
Yeah. I mean, I need to give Steve some credit for this because he did all of the heavy work. I just kind of swooped in the end and was like, wait, I've seen something like this before. So yeah, it's nice when you can sort of just something comes up in a chat and you're suddenly connecting the dots and it kind of all comes together.
Cool. Well, I'm keen to keep track of Steve's progress as getting through all the others, because that's helpful to be able to at least have those signals back.
I think so too. Yes.
Cool.
And then the second one, which I also found kind of fun. So
I'm glad you enjoyed this one, because I sort of threw it at you when John was looking for someone to help with the rollout of this. So yes. I'm glad that it's been an interesting process for you.
Yeah. So this is we're rolling out more real-time updates, which are relying on the WebSockets service, and it's on a very busy endpoint or busy page, which means the overall traffic on the WebSocket service is going to increase quite a bit. And so I took a brief look at this to kind of give some predictions on resources that I would expect to be contended. And so some of them were Redis and some of them were on like the backing Redis, and some of them were on the WebSockets service itself. And so for WebSockets, I kind of predicted, the auto scaling, like basically the limits on how many pods or how many backing nodes we add by auto scaling would probably become contended. And the memory on the WebSockets pods. And so they proceeded with the rollout, and I'm not sure if we posted any graphs of the exact thing, but basically both of those predictions were spot on, and we got saturation on both of them. And so there's let's see, what was the other issue? So there's been kind of this follow-up issue opened, and we're discussing a few approaches for how we can address those bottlenecks. I think we can pretty much scale horizontally. It's mostly a matter of adding more capacity and ensuring that the auto scaling is scaling on the right resource. So we usually auto scale on CPU, but in this case, it's memory that's most contended. So that might actually be a case, or we may want to make a case for auto scaling on memory instead here.
If we're having to scale up to support this particular feature, is there any connection made, and like scaling up means cost, and is there anything that we need to do with the infrafin stuff in terms of reflecting the cost to the feature category?
It's a good question. I don't know how we do that attribution, or I don't know how granular that attribution is.
I think what I'll do then is I'll write a comment on that new issue that you're creating, that I don't know if you created it or if that has been created, to just ask the question, because ordinarily, or at least my experience of it in the past, is that we scale up for a whole bunch of reasons. Like there's a whole lot of things that are contributing together to make us scale up. But this is a very particular feature that's being turned on that is requiring more. So I'll just make a note on there that I'll ask a question.
Yeah, I guess to me, the more holistic view on that is, how do we attribute resource utilization in general? Like for, in this case, the WebSocket service, but we could ask the same question of, say, web or API. How much percent of API is, of the cost that we're spending on API is attributable to certain feature category?
Yeah, and I think that there was some work done in that direction last year, but I didn't follow the end of the work, so I'm not sure where it landed up. But enough of it happened to make me think that I need to ask the question. So I'll go and check. But thank you for watching it so closely with them and for just helping them through the process. Because if they'd just gone and put this on at 100%, we would have had problems.
Rachel, just in regards to that costing stuff, if you could share some knowledge with me or a process, whatever you have, that'd be appreciated.
Sure. I don't know anything. I'll go and find out. It was just a vague memory that I have of something existing last year, and I'll go and dig it up. So
perfect. Appreciate that.
Cool. I do have a question about this. So it's more around the process of this, though, not the finance stuff. But so we had a request come in that was, someone from Scalability, please help us with this thing. We're going to roll this out. And I chose Igor because reasons that I can't remember at the time. You seemed like a good person to ask to take a look at this. I have a feeling it was because we were at low capacity and there were many things in progress at the time. But when requests like this come in future, how are we going to split this between the teams? Because I don't think that this particular thing applies to frameworks or to projections wholly. I think that we might have to do these one for one, but I was just interested in both your opinions and how we should be allocating these going forward.
How is it specific to Scalability? So when the request comes in, like, are people looking for like an SRE with expertise in this area? And does that go beyond Scalability? Like, do we have similar expertise in reliability or delivery?
Well, I think this is an extension of the review request process that we had last year, where if anyone was concerned about how their feature was going to scale, they would reach out to us and someone from the team would take a look. And ordinarily, I allocated it by whoever wasn't on the most critical project at the time, or whoever had space or whoever had the knowledge. And it was generally having to interpret each of the requests and allocate the person accordingly. Often it was due to knowledge, like knowledge was the first requirement more than anything else. But I think that this request was an extension of that, where they recognized that there was going to be some concern around how we were going to, like, what would happen if multiple, if there was a larger uptick in usage than they were expecting, how it would handle that. And so they just reached out to us directly. And now that I say that, I think there was also a thing that was written in the handbook that requires any real-time updates have to be like vetted by Scalability or delivery, I think. I will have to find that reference there, but I expect that there will be more requests like this that come in when people want to release stuff that has to scale.
Yeah, I guess one similar example that comes to mind is when we're or when a team is looking to add a lot of new stuff to a cache.
Yeah.
We've also had conversations about that, and in some cases actually had to push back and say, no, we don't have the caching capacity for that right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the review requests that come in are quite broad and quite general. When there are questions that come in specifically about like error budgets or the usage thereof, then it makes sense to come to projections. But something like this is just, there's no specific owner.
Yeah, and to that point as well, the thing that I was just thinking about is, each time we get one of these, like, what can we do to try and, like, is there anything we can do to make it easier for people to answer this question themselves? But as you say, because perhaps these problems are so nuanced in general, it's maybe hard to do that.
Yeah, I think it's similar to, it's someone reaching out for specialist advice, and the specialist advice happens to be in the area of scalability, but the same thing could be applied to people who reach out to the security team or the, insert any other specialty team name there. So I think there's a certain amount of stuff we can do to make people self-reliant, but there are always going to be the requests that are just so specific that that they're reaching out for a reason, because it's just too much for them to expect them to have that specialized knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do wonder if sort of tying this back to resource attribution, this is the drum that I'm beating, if that could be a way to surface how we're spending resources, which can also give an idea of which resources will we need if we want to increase our usage, right? So we're adding X amount of traffic to this service. If we have a high level view of this service uses these resources, and the contended resource is X, so CPU or memory or both, we can project
well, that's exactly what I'm keen to do. Like, I'm keen to I'm keen to get to a place where people can come to us and say, we want to build this feature. We expect that there's going to be this many customers with this usage pattern that are going to come and join the feature over a 3-month period. In order for us to support that, what are we going to need? And then we can say, well, based on how the thing works and based on what you've told us, we think we're going to need these things, and we think that this is how much it's going to cost. But I see that that's going to take some time for us to build a system like that. I think we've only just gotten to the point of knowing how this stuff runs. So how the feature categories actually operate on GitLab.com. And now we can take that data and continue to build on it and build in the projection side of things. But I absolutely agree that that is where I'm keen to get to.
Do these, I really like the sound of that, Rachel, by the way. Do these requests come in frequent enough that it would be inefficient for like someone from both teams to look at them, so that we can learn about that part of the process, right? So that we can kind of consider from a framework's perspective what we need to do to improve, but also from a projections perspective, what kind of data we can give back to make it easier in the future.
I'm worried that if we have to assign 2 different people to it, that it is that it might not be efficient. I mean, I can see what you're saying, like having people with 2 different lenses on the same problem is helpful in that regard. But I think, and to answer the question, I don't think they are frequent enough that it would be a massive inefficiency. I was thinking more in terms of just having people available to do it, because at the moment, finding one person and pulling them off of a project to say, please look at this thing, or just temporarily assigning, like, please look at this thing, we would now be doing that to 2 people, which means either the same project is getting even slower, or 2 projects have now had a slight delay. So it might just be that when these requests come in future, that between you and me, Liam, we pick someone to do it. Or alternatively, we've got to look at the other things that we're doing as part of triage, and maybe say, your team looks at this aspect of triage and we look at this other aspect of triage, and the responsibility of these incoming review requests flips between the teams. I'm not sure. To be determined.
That makes sense. And I guess at the very least, if we kind of, as you said, we're both aware, like both teams are aware, and we inform the other one, then we can kind of I guess, achieve the goal of giving knowledge to both sides anyway.
Yeah. Well, the next thing I'm going to be looking at in terms of the team split is about the triage stuff. So I'll bear that in mind as I have a look. Cool. Anything else we should chat about while we've got some time? Cool. Well, thanks so much. I hope that you, for those taking the long weekend, I hope that you have a good time with family. For those at work, I hope it's quiet. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Igor.
Bye.